10 things about non-monogamy.
Learning about how open relationships work and how polyamory works will only improve your skill set.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like going to an ice cream shop. Like, ooh, there's like 15 different flavors. Yeah. What do I want? Yeah. Right? And not just like, here's vanilla, take it. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Luvbites by Dr. Tara podcast. Today with us is Alli Iseman. She is actually a really cool relationship coach and the non-monogamy expert. So this episode is 10 things about non-monogamy. We will bust all the myths and learn so much more, and all the things that you think you know might not be true, right?
Definitely.
Hi, Alli.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
How's it going?
So great. Honestly.
Just having sex with 2 people?
Yeah, you know, casual. At least 2. I like to say everything's better in at least 3s. So, yeah.
Well, before we get into like all these questions, let's talk a little bit about like you and, you know, how did you become a non-monogamy expert and what's your relationship situation now?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the short answer is through a lot of trial and error. So I like to say I've learned everything the hard way, so you don't have to. And I do what I do because I wish that someone like me had existed when I started. Because it was a lot of trial and error. We don't have any, or when we certainly didn't about 10 years ago. I started my journey in, 2016, and there was just no examples of anything. So it was sort of like, okay, I know something's different about me. And for me, my clue was, again, I didn't have the language for this back then, was compersion. I never understood and compersion's called like the opposite of jealousy. A lot of times it's when you experience joy or pleasure from watching or hearing about your partner experience joy or pleasure with someone else. And for me, that was a very natural experience I had with my then only monogamous partners. So I would love hearing about their previous relationships, experiences, fantasies, things like that. Not necessarily, that same enjoyment wasn't necessarily in the other direction, but I really loved it and I never understood. I thought that was jealousy. And I'm like, jealousy feels great. Why is everyone given such a bad rap? And then, of course, you know, as I explored, I learned terms like compersion, and then actually did have the opportunity to experience actual jealousy in my first non-monogamous partnership, which is where I learned, oh yeah, this actually really doesn't feel great. And then really coming to understand the intricacies of jealousy and really what it is and how useful it actually is was very transformative. It's an incredible tool for personal growth. It's not something to be avoided.
So you were not a jealous girlfriend back when you had one partner, but then when you became non-monogamous, you experienced some jealousy.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, it was really important to understand kind of the 4 different types of romantic jealousy: insecurity, fear of abandonment, distrust, or competition or comparison.
Look at that. So many types of jealousy. Tell us more.
Well, yeah, that's the power of really understanding it, right? Because then when you understand what type you're dealing with, you can really figure out where it's coming from, right? Am I dealing with an insecurity in myself that's like something I need to address in my own personal work?
So that's the first one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or is it, am I comparing myself to, I don't know, like their previous partners or some idea of something? And that can be related to something called retroactive jealousy, which deserves its own whole episode. But that's being jealous about things that have happened in the past that you can't really do anything about, like your partner's, history, basically. And, if I'm in comparison or if I'm in some, illusion of competition with, other women or women or men or whomever that they're interested in, is that work just for me? Or is there a level of another kind of jealousy, distrust, where there's an insecurity in the relationship? So this is something I need to actually bring to my partner and work on. And then, of course, fear of abandonment. And that could be, connected to attachment wounds and things like that. But when
like
you really
understand
trauma. Exactly. And they're all perfectly normal and perfectly healthy. There's nothing inherently unhealthy about jealousy itself. Right. It's how do you deal with it or not that really determines it.
Yeah. Like if you repress it, then it's a problem. But if you also act out in like a violent, aggressive way, that's also a big problem.
Exactly. Denying it doesn't help anyone. You know, the goal shouldn't be to avoid jealousy. And that's actually, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but that's a big kind of misconception when it comes to non-monogamous relationships as well.
Ooh, okay. So before we go into our 10 things about non-monogamy, the very first thing is let's define what monogamy is.
Yeah. So monogamy is a relationship agreement, right? All relationships are really just agreements, consensual agreements between ideally consenting adults. So monogamy is when two people decide to have exclusivity with each other sexually and emotionally. It can also be called a dyad, which is a term for a relationship between two people. But a dyad isn't exclusively monogamous because you can have a dyad dynamic with somebody and be open, or have, multiple dyad dynamics.
Right. When I talk to people that are like, we're monogamish because we're emotionally monogamous and relationally monogamous, but we're not sexually monogamous. What do you think about that term? Monogamish.
Thank you, Dan Savage. I love terminology. I think language is so interesting.
Language is powerful.
So powerful. And that's why it's important to understand these labels, whether it's monogamish, polyamorous, any of these things. These are conversation starters, not the end of the sentence.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, cool. What does that mean to you?
Right.
What are your actual relationship agreements? Because there's a lot of people that consider themselves monogamous and they're actually participating in unconsensual non-monogamy.
Cheating.
Yeah. And so
plenty of people are cheating. It was like 1 in 3 people have cheated or have been cheated on. It's like such a common phenomenon, but it's sad because it could have been like communicated and prevented and, all kinds of things. So that's interesting that you brought that up. And I also want to remind you all listening and watching to stay open-minded and curious throughout this episode, because perhaps a lot of things are disagreeing with what you think or what you believe in now. But knowledge is power, and the more you know, the more fun you are.
And I would offer, the more you know yourself and about what's available to you, the more fulfilling your relationships can be.
Yes.
Because this is not, I want to be clear, this is not a conversation about monogamy bad, non-monogamy good.
All good.
Absolutely not.
Everything's good.
All
love is love.
Yes.
We love love.
For me, my work is about really helping people make the relationship choice.
Yeah.
Because we're in a culture where we're told there's this sort of like one size fits all. And if it's not working for you, you're the problem.
Then you're a failure.
Yeah. And that's just, that culture of shame is where we get into this, 43% of reported infidelity and things like that, which I don't know about you, but most people I know and speak to and work with don't want to hurt the people that they care about.
No.
So it's about really understanding all of the relationship dynamics that are available so that you can make an informed decision and choose the relationship dynamic that's best for you based on your needs, which, as long as it's a choice, that can be monogamy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like going to an ice cream shop. Like, ooh, there's like 15 different flavors. Yeah. What do I want? Yeah. Right? And not just like, here's vanilla, take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's go into the questions. Yeah. Number 1, what are the different types of open relationships?
I love this. Well, and like I said, I want to reiterate, these are terms, again, that start a conversation. So understanding sort of, the umbrella term of consensual or ethical non-monogamy encompasses a number of different relationship structures. So like you said, monogamish is something that's been incorporated. It's related to open relationships. So that's when generally you have, one, what I would call a core or primary partner. It's a hierarchical structure. So you have your core partnership, which is usually your, emotional anchor partner. And then you have other sexual experiences. And depending on the agreements you have with your partner, those experiences can be only together, they can be only separate, or they can be both. And so that's where we get into some swinging or swapping is another version. And that's generally couples only that will exchange and, swap with each other, basically swapping partners. And so that can look like, couples who date each other. That can look like swinger parties where it's just couples exchanging, generally only sexually. It's not an emotional connection. And then we move into polyamory, which can be hierarchical or non-hierarchical. And when I say hierarchical, that means, varying levels of importance or emotional or time investment in different relationships. And these are all things that get negotiated. And there's different feelings within the space of whether, hierarchy is technically ethical or not. And that's, again, a whole episode on its own.
Yeah, because when you say ethical non-monogamy, it means like everyone's knowledgeable of what's going on. Everyone's consenting to be there and happy to be there. And that's the ethical
And that's
part.
the key difference. And I use the term consensual rather than ethical because that's the important part, right? That's the difference.
It's ethics so different.
Who's ethical? Who gets to decide what ethics are, what's ethical, what's not ethical,
I mean,
right?
even like all the different religion have like different ethics.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then there's the implication of if it's, ethical non-monogamy implies that maybe like inherently it's non-ethical and it's consensual non-monogamy. And exactly to your point,
happy
everyone
to be there.
Involved is aware of what's going on, informed and consenting to this, agreement that is the relationship structure. So we talked about monogamish, open relationships, polyamory, and then there is relationship anarchy, which is a really, really cool framework to look at because it's the understanding that all relationships, romantic, platonic, whatever, they're all kind of on the same playing field, right?
I've never heard of that term.
Yeah, it's really cool because it's very much build your own relationship in a lot of ways where there is, you in a sense are your own primary partner. It's very similar to like solo poly. And
What's a solo poly?
So solo poly is that idea of like, when there's hierarchy in polyamory, you have a primary partner or primary relationship, such as, you can have a 3-person relationship and maybe that's the core partnership, but you each date. And so it's still open. Or you can have a closed, which would be a triad or a thruple, depending on the relationship structure. The difference is a triad is 3 people who are each basically having one-on-one relationships. So it's just 3, in a sense, dyads. But a thruple is when all 3 people are also dating each other collectively as a group. And so you can have a closed polycule, which would be that structure, or you can have an open one, which means you're seeing other people. You
can have sex with other people outside of that group.
Exactly, or date other people. Right. Again, these are all the agreements that you go through. And what's so powerful about exploring what I call expansive relationship dynamics or looking at relationships as just an inclusive process is whatever relationship dynamic you choose, again, ideally it's a choice once you have this information, you can use these skills to improve any relationship. So even if your ideal relationship structure is monogamy, learning about how open relationships work and how polyamory works will only improve your skill set.
So what are the benefits of open relationships?
Oh my God, that's how much time we have? The level of communication, again, to me, it's really about improving our relationships across the board. The level of open communication and personal responsibility for your own emotional experience, making sure you're taking care of yourself, making sure you're communicating your needs, that you know your needs so you know how to communicate them. All of that is a requirement for sustainable open relationships or any kind of consensual non-monogamy. And it would only improve monogamous relationships as well. Your relationship container, whatever the structure is ideally a safe space for you to make mistakes in, because we have to actually make mistakes to learn. But if you're in a relationship where you feel like you have to be perfect and maybe you can't share all of like your fantasies because you don't know, maybe your partner is gonna, not like that. And we're not able to actually meet each other. And we have these separations between us. So whether you have 1 partner or 3, that ability to really be honest, to hold your discomfort when things are unknown. Honestly, if there's one takeaway, actually, that is the biggest skill set you can build is your capacity to hold discomfort. It will impact every area of your life, work, family, romantic relationships, friendships, your relationship with yourself.
And that's
everything.
Honed in open relationships?
Absolutely. Because if you think there are challenges in a relationship with one person, imagine having all those challenges times 3. Something that was really interesting for me is I did a lot of work around my attachment wounds. And I was like, okay, I realize I have, anxious attachment tendencies. Let me look at that. Let me work on that. I got, myself to a very secure place. I got to practice that in relationship. And then I got to discover in polyamorous dynamics an avoidant tendency of myself that I didn't even know existed because another type of dynamic brought that out in me with a new person. So I got to do work I wouldn't have gotten to do had I only chosen, monogamous.
Like was the partner clingy? And then you're like, oh, hell no, this is annoying.
A little.
Yeah.
There was a little. But
does
again,
that happen?
For me, it's understanding what my needs are, what my capacity is so that I can communicate that.
Yeah.
So both people involved in the relationship can make a decision on whether or not this is, this works for us right now.
So you are in a relationship with 2 people right now?
Yeah. Well, I have 2 partners. We're all in a thruple. I kind of, I feel silly when I say that word. I know plenty of people love that word and there's wonderful people using it. So we've decided since we were using the word triad and then realized the difference between, we're dating each other. So it's not these 3 separate one-on-one relationships. We're all together. And so I just giggle every time I say thruple. So we decided we're a triceratops.
I like that. And have you experienced jealousy in the relationship?
In this relationship, not yet. It is on the newer side.
Okay.
So we're definitely still like learning about each other and, seeing that like we've hit a few friction points and honestly handled it really beautifully. But then that capacity again to hold discomfort, like I'm getting to learn new things.
Yeah.
Because these are new people to me and this dynamic is new. And so really understanding how we each relate and then how we relate together is not jealousy yet so much for me, but there's definitely been
just navigating.
Yeah, like patience shows up in different ways, and like that capacity again to hold discomfort, because I'm definitely noticing some of those avoidant tendencies in certain areas coming up, and I'm like, you know what? I want to work on that because that's not who I want to be. I don't want to respond like that.
So do you all share like love, affection, and sex together?
Yeah.
The three of you? Or is it like you with this one person, you with this one person?
So we have one-on-one time with each other as well, but we're all together. So that's the difference between generally a triad. I mean, you can use triad and thruple interchangeably, and they are commonly, but the, official definition, if you will, is a triad again would be, three one-on-one relationships, but the three of us aren't engaged with each other. It's like three separate, not monogamous, well, kind of monogamous relationships, or open relationships, I should say. But then a thruple is when all three people are also dating each other and sleeping with each other and whatever agreements within. So we are a thruple in that we all date each other, we spend time together, we have sex together. It's all, a 3-person experience, and we're open.
It's a 3-person experience.
Everything's better in threes, baby. Everything's better in threes.
I like the law of threes. Like everything is more attractive in threes.
But it's
like
an incredible
design.
balance. Yeah, it's the strongest shape in the universe, triangle. So
exactly.
And it's been so fun to experience that, because it's, a dynamic. But honestly, this is my first official, I guess, version
thruple.
of that. Yeah. And, I've been in this space for almost a decade, and I've had, almost versions of this, but this is something that's been really beautiful and, very, I don't like saying easy, because, we each have put a lot of work into being who we are today to make this work. So I will say with ease, it's been really a lovely experience, and getting to learn new things.
Yeah.
I will always be learning. There is no finish line of like, okay, I have it figured out. I have my, graduate master's PsyD encyclopedia stamp of relationship
We're
knowledge.
all always learning.
Always.
Yeah.
And I think that's another one. You said, the things you can learn from this, curiosity.
Yeah.
The second you think everything your partner or partners are going to say, do, everything, you got it figured out. We finish each other's sentences. I like to say, isn't that just called interrupting?
Right.
You don't actually know, because ideally you're both, or you're all always growing.
Yeah.
Let them surprise you. Invite that surprise. And that is much easier when you come from curiosity. For me, it diffuses a lot of frustration and things like that, when I can just go, I wonder what's under this. I wonder what else is here.
Yeah. You know what else comes in 3?
What?
The balls and the penis.
That's true.
and the penis needs safety.
Definitely.
Right? Safer sex is always the best sex. I say that all the time. Safer sex is always the best sex. So that is why I love partnering with MyONE condoms, and particularly MyONE condoms, because why would you, get custom suits and get hot and sexy with custom suits without getting your custom condoms?
I love it.
Isn't this so cool?
Yes.
Like, you can look at this measuring tape right there. Here's one for you.
Custom relationships, custom condoms.
Exactly. So you can get this measuring tape online on their website, which is going to be linked in the episode description. You can measure your penis length and measure the girth this way.
I love this.
I'm like, where's
I want to
the girth?
do this with.
Yeah,
I want to be a part
I wish
of this.
I have a dick so I can measure
Honestly.
it. But yeah, you measure the length, you measure the girth. I'm always struggling with the girth. The girth. And then you can order your custom condoms, which fits perfectly without any kind of embarrassment. You can be extremely confident in having safer sex, putting on your custom condom. I also think it's such a baller move to like pull out a condom and be like, oh baby, I have a condom. It's custom.
Custom made.
Yeah. Not just something I picked up from CVS.
No, not off
like,
the shelf.
I ordered this. This is my custom. It's like, you see my Armani suits, they're custom. Same with my condoms from MyONE condoms. This is why I really love them. They have 52 different sizes. It's insane. It's like so many different sizes. So I'm going to be linking it in the episode description. So definitely check them out. And yeah, 100% get custom condoms.
Everyone has a better time when everyone's comfortable.
Exactly. And it fits perfectly. So like there's no embarrassment. There's no like leftovers or too small or whatever the issues that people experience.
Exactly. Beautiful.
Okay. So my next question for you is, What are common boundaries in an open relationship?
Yeah, I think really determining your hierarchy of exclusivity, I call it, your need for exclusivity emotionally and physically really informs what boundaries are there. So, do I want to hear about everything you do on your dates, or do I just kind of want to know you're on a date? And that's good enough.
Right. Like, oh, you guys did anal? You don't need to tell me.
I don't need a diagram. Like,
just say like, hey, I'm going on a date. I'll be back.
Exactly. So you determine that level of communication is key. There's something called don't ask, don't tell, which I don't advise.
Why not?
Because it can really just shield important work. It can be a way to avoid jealousy. And again, you don't want to avoid jealousy.
In my 20s, I was in a don't ask, don't tell, and terribly.
It's not ideal.
No,
because it can mask cheating, it can mask jealousy, it can help you avoid a lot of things that are actually really important to work on.
Good point. What are some common misconceptions about open relationships? This one I feel like you can go forever. How about tell us like top 3?
Yeah. A big one, it's a free-for-all. You can do anything with anyone. Yeah, we're open. It's like whatever.
So false.
So false. Boundaries are what give us freedom. I know a lot of people think boundaries are like rules but they're the edges of your comfort zone. So when you know where your boundaries are, you know where you can push consensually and in a safe environment in order to grow. So again, that free-for-all, total myth. The other big one is that, non-monogamous people, polyamorous people, we don't experience jealousy. Could not be farther from the truth. We approach jealousy differently, ideally, and we use it as a tool to strengthen our bond and to strengthen our personal self-development, basically. Those are 2 of the big ones for sure.
What is like a practical way once I feel jealousy in my body? Like let's say, okay, my husband's going on a date with this person tonight and I'm feeling it. Like what would be the first practical thing I should be doing to address this?
Well, I think like what you just said, you're feeling it. I think that's key. Feel it. Where is it in your body? Find it. Is it in your stomach?
What if you're like, I hope he doesn't have a good time.
Yeah, great. Release the story. Make it physical. Where is it in my body? Identify it. Put it there. Okay. And then really try to figure out which one. We kind of touched on the 4 types, right? So am I dealing with an insecurity about myself? Am I dealing with comparison or competition? Am I dealing with a fear of abandonment? Or is this distrust? And once you understand which kind, then you know if it's something for you to work on or something you also need to bring to your partner. And then you can start actually creating a plan of action and you'll find that diffuses a lot of it.
A probing question. How does one know that open relationship is right for them?
Well, determining your ideal relationship structure, I like to call it your IRS, the fun IRS. And that's done through understanding your hierarchy of exclusivity. We touched on it earlier a little bit about your sexual or your physical or your emotional and romantic needs, because those are separate, right? We think sex and emotions are the same. They're related, they're connected, but your needs sexually and your needs emotionally or romantically are actually 2 different planes. So when you understand kind of how much exclusivity you need on each of those, you can determine which relationship structure is best for you, and it might be open. If you want more emotional exclusivity, but you actually need less exclusivity physically, an open dynamic might be good for you.
Oh, so when you reflect and you realize like, oh, I do have some room to play when it comes to like sexual exclusivity, then that's like, okay, let's start this conversation, right?
Let's start the conversation. It doesn't mean we're going to a sex party tomorrow. Learn about it. Let's develop some skills. Yes. Ideally prepare, create some sort of basic relationship agreement so you have some boundaries.
And if you have no idea what these like relationship agreements are, you can just call Alli.
Yes.
Because like she has a bunch of different agreements and you get to check the boxes and talk through it and then you'll have a brand new relationship.
And it's actually fun. Like it's very,
I bet it's
you
fun.
Can make a date night. It can be very sexy. Like this is a fun thing to do.
Only the last few years I learned that I am bisexual but hetero-romantic. So
huge distinction.
Romantically, emotionally, like my life partner, I have a male partner, I have a husband, but I am bisexual. I'm physically attracted and sexually attracted to both men and women. And it's been so liberating to know, okay, like bisexual, but then people always question me, well, then why don't you ever date women?
Yes.
I'm like, well, because I'm hetero-romantic. And like, you can choose that for yourself. It's fucking 2024. Like,
it was a big one for me too. I used to beat myself up. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like objectifying women.
Are you bi-romantic?
I would say, I'll call it heteroflexible, but
heteroflexible.
definitely more heteroromantic and very
and
much. But I'm a yes sexual. Just
all sexual.
Yes. Are we attracted to each other? Let's go.
Alien sexual. What advice do you have for couples about communicating in an open relationship? Let's say we're already in a step of like, maybe, let's try it. Like, what would be some of the tips about communication?
Well, again, establishing those boundaries. How do we want to communicate to new potential partners, and how do we want to communicate with each other about potential new partners? That's a big one. Again, how much do I want to know? How much do I not want to know, and why? And allow room for mistakes. Big distinction, a mistake occurs, you learn from it, it's uncomfortable. A pattern of the same mistake over and over again, that's a behavioral issue that needs to be addressed. Two different things. Mistakes are okay. Mistakes are important. So making sure you're creating a safe container in the way you communicate, again, strengthening that ability to hold discomfort, because your partner is going to share things that may make you uncomfortable, and you may have to share things that make you uncomfortable. So making sure that you're responsible for your reactions and your experience so that your partner feels safe sharing with you, and vice versa. If you're in a couple, you're already in a threesome. There's you, there's your partner, and there's the relationship. Exactly. You have to make that relationship part, that us, a safe container for both of you to be vulnerable.
Talking about feeling safe, my next question is very much intertwined with that. Safety and like trust, right? Because you feel safe when you trust your partner. So how, like if you're in an open relationship that involves whether or not it's dating other people, having sex with other people, going to like swinging, whatever it is, like how do you build that trust and safety?
So I'm going to say something that's going to make some people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The only way you build trust is by making the agreement that you are giving someone else the power and ability to hurt you, and letting them prove they won't over and over again over time. That's it. Trust is not built by closing your relationship. It's not built by controlling behavior. It's not built by telling somebody what to do, what they can't do. It's built by allowing someone the ability to hurt you. It's scary. Yeah. And they will prove that they won't over and over again. And they can make mistakes. Again, we make mistakes. We're flawed.
People hurt people all the time.
Yeah. But it's the intent. Are they trying to hurt you? Are they doing the same thing over and over and over and not working on this thing that we've already talked about? That's different. Mistakes happen and you can rebuild trust. But you do have to take that initial leap of because ideally you've already proven that you're not, out to hurt me. I'm going to take that next leap and say, I will be vulnerable with you. I'm going to give you that power and let you show me that you deserve it.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
And when mistakes do happen, like what kind of mistakes happen? Like, for example, do you say you agree to a certain structure? Like, let's say you're only having sex with people outside of your crew, like your group, your social circle, but then one person in the relationship ends up having sex with someone in the social circle. Is that a mistake?
That can definitely be a mistake. I would say the ones I see most commonly are related to what I call compound meanings. And
compound
meanings, which are connected to a shared language. So these are tools that I work on with my clients. Compound meanings are things like socially, we assume a big one is, love, sex, and commitment. Those are all synonyms, right? No, those are 3 different ingredients that we get to include at varying levels in our relationships. So when we don't have definitions for terms like that, like what is cheating? What is sex? How do you define those things? Then it's really easy to make those mistakes. Oh, I thought cheating was just, penetrative genital sex. So I've been getting head all over the world.
I didn't cheat.
Yeah. So you really defining those things is much more helpful.
Okay, the next question is the inevitable of time. Just like monogamous relationship where, it changes over time, right? And with life situations, like you have a kid or a dying parent or like, tension grow, finances, like things like that. What about open relationships? Like what are things that are changing over time?
Everything you just said. I think you're not doing yourself a service if you think everything's going to stay the same in your relationship. So I work with my clients to build what I call the relationship agreement, which is like a literal document and outlines all of the agreements around communication, safer sex practices, et cetera. But the most important part of that document is the section about review and renewal. You need to look at that agreement on a regular basis, whether it's monthly, quarterly, I suggest more often than annually. But you and your relationship are constantly growing and changing, to your point. So your relationship agreement, the agreement that is your relationship, needs to grow and change as well. So you renegotiate, again, how do we communicate about these different things? What are our nesting agreements, which is, about living together? What are our co-parenting agreements? Is this working? Is this not working? What's working and not working? What do we need to change? Making that creation of that relationship an ongoing and active part.
And how often do people do that?
I would recommend ideally quarterly.
I love
every
it.
few
Quarterly,
months.
like taxes.
It's all a relationship, right? It's all an agreement.
Yeah.
You want it to be a part of, we get very passive about our relationships.
Mhm.
Oh, we're together. We have this label, everything's
So
fine
passive.
now.
Exactly.
No, it's it's alive. It's living
Yeah.
and breathing just like you.
Relationship is work.
Yeah. And your
if
sexual needs might
and
change.
if you think, oh my God, that's like too much, then I think that you
That's
might
relating.
run into issues later in your relationship if you don't accept that you do have to work on it and you do have to spice things up. You do have to figure out, like, maybe this structure used to work. Maybe monogamy used to work, but maybe it doesn't anymore. And that's okay. There's like no shame in that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually another misconception is like, you're open, you have to be open forever.
No, you can be close after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are times in life where maybe you might need to narrow your relationship network a little bit, and that's okay. You talk to everyone about it, you include them in the decision, so it's not like a shock.
Yeah.
But like, there are times where you might need to simplify, and that's okay.
My husband and I started our relationship being monogamous, and then now we're monogamish. So things change all the time. And maybe sometime we will like completely open it up. Maybe sometimes we will close it again, be monogamous. Like, it just depends.
There's a lot of power in trying.
So cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool to know I'm not stuck in this like little box society gives us. Yeah. And that's my next question is, how do you deal with societal stigma? Because there's still so much stigma.
With curiosity to the best of my ability. Because if somebody's, meeting me with that judgment or trying to shame me for whatever it is, I know who I am and I know why I, make these choices. So I'm good. The opinion of someone who knows less about something than me doesn't really faze me. Why would it? But I want to be curious about where they're coming from, because if I can help maybe alleviate just a little bit of that fear, because it's usually coming from fear, not accessing something in themselves, maybe I can add value.
Mm-hmm. There's this couple that I know, and they have a kid, and they started opening up their relationship, and they, have like a different partner like coming to the house and stuff like that. And then the people in the neighborhood started like noticing, and then the moms at school started noticing, and she was telling me like, I get a lot of eyes, like, ooh, she's, either cheating on her husband or like whatever. So for people that are open and like have children, how do they navigate social stigma? Because it's like really hard.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest, I guess, weak points I could say that I see where people come starting to work with me is there's no support network. Because again, we don't see representations of this, even though it's so common. One out of, I think it was 30%, I believe, of people either have been or are currently in a consensually non-monogamous relationship. That's massive, but it's not being represented. So we think it's so rare. So that, again, all that fear and that judgment. So finding a support network is key, whether that's, working with a professional like myself or someone else, seeking out community online. There's plenty of, different groups and things like that, apps, that sort of a thing. But really building community around it is key. It doesn't mean you have to cut everyone else out in your life, but just having a few people in your life who understand and will really change that for you.
Do you have to explain to your like family?
My mother is aware, and there was a, for lack of better terminology, a coming out conversation.
Yeah.
I'm out and about as every way as you can be at this point in life. There is a person who doesn't really know. My other parent doesn't, and that's a more complicated conversation.
So with your mom, what was her response?
Oh, she's always been really lovely about that sort of thing. Even she's like, I don't understand, but as long as you're happy and you're healthy, I'm happy. I'm like, great. If you have questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like people's responsibility to completely educate their family and friends, right? Like if you're curious, ask, but it's not your job to be educating every single person in your life.
Well, and that's why make a decision about disclosure, right? Like you get to decide. You don't have to anything. If you want to be out, okay, great. And decide how much responsibility you want to have. Do you want to give them some resources, some reading? Do you just want to say, you know what, Google it? Decide before you talk to them maybe about what, again, those boundaries are for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. My last question is, what advice would you give to someone considering opening up their relationship?
Nerd the fuck out. Read everything you can. Vet your sources as much as possible because there is more information now, which is exciting. There was like hardly anything when I first started, but I'm not the only one doing what I do. There are some really wonderful coaches and educators on this topic. I have a course called ENM 101 that really walks you through all the basics, but really learn as much as you can, become a student, get really curious, and then, again, come from that curiosity. If you want to open up that conversation with your partner, that initial conversation is more about, hey, I'm curious about something. How does this idea feel for you? Not, I want to open our relationship. Hey, I heard about this thing called consensual non-monogamy or open relationships or whatever on the show, this podcast, whatever. Have you heard about this? Like, what do you think about this? Coming from that curiosity, it enables you to invite a conversation rather than accidentally initiate opposition with your partner.
Accidentally initiating opposition.
Yeah.
That's such a cool phrase. Because it's so true. And it goes with like anything, right? Like anything big, sex, relationship, finances, children. Like you don't want to just say, I want to do this. You just like, what do you think about this?
What do you think? I'm curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, before you leave, what would be like your last wise words that you want everyone to know about consensual non-monogamy?
Learning more about consensual non-monogamy cannot hurt you. It's just learning about something new. It might not be for you. Maybe it will be, but you don't know unless you learn about what it actually is. And again, these relationship skills that are necessary for consensual non-monogamy to work can only improve your relationship, even if the dynamic you choose is monogamy.
Period. Love that. Where can everyone find you?
I'm at passport2pleasure.com, and it's the number 2, passport2pleasure. I'm on all the socials. I'm on Substack, YouTube, Instagram, all the things.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And my Luvbites fam, thank you so much for listening, watching, liking, sharing, leaving comments. I love and appreciate all of you, and I wish you an orgasmic day. Bye.
Thanks for listening. This was Love Bites. Love Bites. By Dr. Tara. Follow Dr. Tara on social media at lovebites.co. Have an orgasmic day.